Hi, I'm James Muir, and this is another Make More Noise screencast. Another free plugin today. We're going to have a look at Amplitube Free from IK Multimedia, which you get by going to their site, ikmultimedia.com/amplitube free. You should be able to see the spelling up here on the screen nice and easily, or bang it into Google. If you don't have an account with IK, you'll need to sign up for one. They have an online authorization process, and then you can download the installer, which comes bundled with a proper installer program, so it'll walk you through the install process. It's available for all the big formats, so you've got VST, RTAS and audio units, so it should work in most hosts. We're going to have a look at it today in Logic because that's what we usually do. So let's just create a new track in Logic and we'll bring up the IK Multimedia Amplitube 3. I'm not going to say that right at any stage today, am I, by the sounds of it? So mono or mono to stereo. Most times for guitars, I guess you'd just be using mono. So let's have a quick walk through. You've got a preset selection bank up here, which if you come down the list, you've got Amplitube Free, which gives you complete rigs for bass, clean sounds, crunch, and leads with more distortion. More basic amp settings, bass amps, tube amps, and American Tube Clean. And then you've got some which are demarked by style, so rock, pop, jazz, heavy metal, FX, funky, and blues. So that should be enough to get you going if you're a guitar player. I'm not going to really do this from the perspective of a guitar player, even though I am a guitar player myself. Kind of guessing that most guitar players will be relatively familiar with the way these kind of things work. So let's start right at the beginning. It's quite interesting the way they've laid this out. So you've got a signal flow here at the top. So a tuner, which obviously very useful if you're a guitar or a bass player, less so if you're going to do other stuff. Then you've got a section where you can put in stomp boxes, which are effects pedals, and you can see along here you've got 6 slots. Currently all 6 are empty. So to load a pedal into the slot, you simply click where it says empty, and then you'll see you've got your Amplitude 3 list here rather than free, so F for free, TH 3. And you'll notice that some of them are grayed out, so Echo Man and Tape Delay are grayed out in the delay section, but you have got a delay. So basically, like a lot of freebies, this is a cut down version of a full version which would come with many, many more features. But we'll leave that up to IK to promote that themselves. We're just going to talk about the stuff you can get that's cool and free. So distortion, dynamics, EQ, filter, no fuzzes available at all, more's the pity. Modulation, no pitch available, and then you've got a volume pedal here. So let's just load up one very quickly so you can see the process. There you go, that's the delay pedal loaded. Works like a normal guitar delay pedal would. And you at the bottom here have got BPM sync or not, which is useful if you're using it inside a DAW, so you can have it synced to the tempo of your track. Once you had a look at the stomp section, you can obviously load up multiple different stomps, and the order you put them in will affect the way it sounds. So you can have the compressor before the delay, or delay before the compressor, or any variation on the above. Let's come across to the amps now. So this is one type of amp they've got here, and if you look at here, you've got your pre model. So you can then come into here and select a different type of pre, or by going further down the list, you've got the British model here, which will change you out to a different type of amp. And again here, you've got different types of pre's and different types of EQ sections, some of which will be available, some of which won't, depending on whether you've got this free version or the full version they do. Across to cabs, which enables you to select different types of cabinets by using these left and right arrows here, and different types of microphones. That looks very much like a Neumann to me, and that looks like a Shure SM57. You can move these about on the cabinet, so further away, left or right, center it right up on the speaker. And same thing here with the 87. You can mute, solo, or phase invert any of them, and you can pan them, and then you've got an overall control between the blends. I say so most of this should be pretty second nature for guitar players. And then finally you've got rack effects, which work the same way. Click and hold, and it'll bring down a list of what's available. So delays available, digital delay, but no reverb or tap. EQ. So they're all the ones which are freebies. Any of the ones that are grayed out aren't included. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is you can obviously go through and bypass any section here. So if you wanted to have no amp at all, you can just click bypass, no cab at all. Where's the bypass switch for that? You can bypass it as well. So that way you could just use the pedals, which we've got selected, with no amp and no cab and no rack effect at the moment. So if we instantiate a rack effect, then we'll get the option to bypass that as well. So although this is an emulation of a complete guitar rig, the way I'm coming at this today is to think about it more like an effects unit. So guitar players are going to be, this is going to be pretty second nature to you. But what I've done is I've dragged in a load of Apple loops, which I think are a fairly good starting point of bland and basic sounds. So let's just go through and bypass the Amplitube settings we've got. And what we've got up here is an electric piano, an Apple loop of bass, fairly bog standard drum kit, and then a little layered synth sound sitting in the background. And I think like most of the Apple loops, they're good starting points, but they're fairly basic sounding, anodyne almost. So without any instances of Amplitube, it sounds like this. So not enormously exciting, but fairly indicative of what the bundled Apple loops sound like. And what I did with this earlier is I went through and stuck a few instances of Amplitube on, which I will just unbypass. So we've gone through and Alt-clicked all of those to bypass and Alt-clicked again to unbypass. So holding down the Alt key and just clicking on it will bypass it or unbypass it. And then with 5 instances of Amplitube loaded up, none of which are on guitar, it sounds like this. So I kept all of that fairly subtle when I was processing it. I've tried not to be overwrought and over distort everything, but I'll give you a quick, excuse me, I'll give you a quick run through what I did. On the first channel, which is the pad, we've got, because it's like a Fender Rhodes sound, I stuck it through a guitar amp, which is actually fairly traditional for a Fender Rhodes. No stomps, just through a cab, and I didn't play around much with the miking. And then I just added a nice digital delay on the end of it. Coming across a channel, this is the bass, and obviously the lovely thing about Amplitude is it's got good presets for bass, but I made my own one from scratch here. Didn't, again, fiddle around much with the EQ. So we basically got an amp and a cab and some miking, nothing in the rack effects. And this is the pad sound, and what I've done with that is I've added a tremolo and a chorus to give it some modulation and some thickness, and then I've rolled off the bottom end using the graphic EQ. And then finally, with the drum kit, what I did was I've used the basic channel EQ that comes with the preset that's loaded with Logic, and then I've created a bus, and with that bus I've sent it to a copy of Amplitube. And what I did here was I bypassed the amp, bypassed the cab, used no rack effects at all, but I used the stomp box compressor, which gives it a nice dirty sound. And then using the aux send control, I've mixed that in underneath the drum kit sound to give us a slightly crunchy sound. So let's just have a listen to a couple of those in solo with and without Amplitude. So this is the basic Rhodes sound at the beginning. Let's start with Amplitube off, and I'll switch it on halfway through. And same idea with the bass. We'll start with Amplitube off, and then I'll switch it on halfway through. And with the drum kit, instead of bypassing Amplitube, what I'm going to do is bypass this bus send so you can hear the compressor I've put on the aux in action. And then finally on the synth that we had as a background pad in bypass, and then I'll switch Amplitube back on. So there you go. The sort of common thread there is that all of those effects add a little bit of dirt and take away some of the dryness of the sound, make them sound a little bit more beefy, a little bit more interesting. And I think when you have all of the sounds playing together, you don't really perceive that as distortion. You just perceive it as a bit of extra body and depth. Makes the whole thing sound a bit more coherent to me, more glued together, I think is an expression a lot of people use. So what I really wanted to demonstrate today with Amplitube is that it really isn't just for guitar players. You can use it on all kinds of things. I can imagine using the fuzz boxes on vocals. It was something I used to do a lot when I worked with an analog console, was use effects pedals as outboard, because they've got some character, some quirk to them. You know, obviously a good compressor, a good EQ and a good reverb are your basic tools. But when you consider this is free and it adds a load more interesting sounds to your arsenal, I don't really think you can argue with that. So guitar players, Amplitube free, well worth trying out. Sounds pretty good on guitars, great for doing quick demos, and I can even imagine it making it into finished tracks. People who didn't think they'd be interested in Amplitube, so programmers, keyboard players, engineers, producers, download it, give it a try, see if you can find some space for some of these cool sounds in your work. I hope you enjoy Amplitube free. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I've been James Muir. Thanks for watching.